Mussa Assad to deliver his presentation. Professor Assad, please.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wa imamil mursalin, Muhammad bin Abdullahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What we just said is to give all the praises to Allah, the God, for all his major blessings and minor blessings, and to request, to pray to Allah to spread his peace on the teacher of a religion, Prophet Muhammad, and his followers. And that's always the way we advise to start our sessions if we are speaking. Since we are speaking here from the perspective of Muslim University of Morogoro, that is the proper way of starting. Having done that, I must say, where did this come from? This presentation started about 60, 70 days ago through LinkedIn, where one of the ladies I met about 20 years ago, an English lady, asked me to write her something to publish in her magazine. And within the day, I said, I'm going to write something on public sector corruption, thinking it was going to be easy. So I did that. It took me 3 weeks. By the end of 3 weeks, I asked myself, why do I need to have a British audience for this topic of ours? Why can't we have a local audience? And then the idea started to crystallize, where we thought the executive seminar development series could be an avenue for us to do this. So I prepared my PowerPoints, and about a month ago, we did a pre-launch seminar in Morogoro to test the feasibility of this idea. And it appeared to be quite good. And then we decided within a month, end of March, we'll be doing this here. So it is not an accident. This is something we thought we needed to do, and we thought about 60 days ago. Things have changed quite a bit. Why did we come to a private hotel? Because then we thought if you went to a public hotel, you could be stopped just before starting. Somebody said, you cannot make a presentation here. What's the possibility? And that is why you see us in New Africa Hotel, because it's a private hotel. The government could not interfere with the operations of this hotel. And I must say thank you very, very much for New Africa for providing this opportunity. We'll do the gratitudes a little bit later, but we are extremely grateful that the hotel has provided us this opportunity. Now, in terms of the topic, you saw it there. These are the seminar series Professor Josie talked about, and that is the topic, public sector corruption, its manifestations. We're not going to talk about the causes of corruption. We're going to talk about manifestation. How do we see corruption? We're going to talk about enablers, things that actually encourage corruption in this country. And then finally, we'll talk about possible cures from my perspective. But before I go anywhere, always I start with this. These are my views only. They do not necessarily relate to the views of Muslim University of Morogoro. They do not relate. I'm saying this because after we did a pre-launch about a month ago, somebody called from Dar es Salaam to one of my officials to say, do you need the university in Morogoro or do you not need the university in Morogoro? That was the environment. If you did this kind of thing, the university could be taken away from you. So I said, no, we have an obligation to speak, and we're going to speak. It's not a problem for us. And that is why we say we're going to do this in Dar es Salaam, and I'm happy that we're going to do it today. Circumstances have changed, of course, but it's nice that we're doing it today. But this is a proper disclaimer for us to say these views are mine alone, no relationship with Muslim University of Morogoro. Of course, I'm there, and we did a pre-launch there, so there is some association, but these views are mine alone. Now, that is, in terms of coverage, what we're going to do. Some limited definitions. We have one slide on the scale of corruption within Africa. We have about 6 slides on manifestations of corruption, mostly within Tanzania, but within African countries as well. Enablers of corruption in Tanzania, and we're going to offer possible cures for corruption within the Tanzanian context as well. Usually when I do presentation, I do maximum 12 slides, but this time this is much, much more than 12 slides. You'll have to persevere with me. You hopefully will finish within the time, but I might exceed a little bit, and you have to be patient with me. And this is the starting point, very broad. وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحِهَا وَادْعُوهُ خَوْفًا وَطَمَعًا. This is Arabic, and that is the translation. Do not mischief on earth after it has been set in order, perfect order, but call on him, God, with fear and longing, tama. And this is the verse in the Quran that refers to fasada, ufisadi, corruption. And I thought this is where we needed to start, because it's a very, very broad definition. Basically, when God created all things, they were perfectly created. So when you see a river, it has reeds, it has trees along the root of the river. When you uproot the roots of the river, of the trees, eventually the river will change its course and do damage. That is perfection. If you look after the environment very well, the environment will look after you. And that is the thinking from the Muslim perspective. If you don't do that, you are doing fasada, and that is corruption. So from our perspective, we take a very broad definition of fasada, of corruption, and that is where we are starting from. Later, I'm going to contrast with the definition literature, and then you see the contrast. In daily lives, you see these examples of corruption. Using water in excess of what you really need. You brush your teeth this morning. If you have a sink, you open the tap and you put some toothpaste and you are brushing your teeth. Usually, you must have used about 3-4 liters of water. Did you need 4 liters of water? You didn't. All you needed was just a cup. Use a cup and you brush your teeth, and the maximum you need is just a cup, maybe half a liter. But every day we use 3-4 liters to brush our teeth, and that is from the perspective of the definition I gave earlier, that is fasada, that is corruption. So if you define corruption that way, we're going to see a lot of things we accept nowadays actually are not proper things, and they'll fall under corruption. That is an example. Here is another example, serving food that you not actually finish. And I have a photograph here. You see that photograph, huh? I have my 2 girls here and they're laughing because they saw this. What you see there is a plate, eaten plate. But it's not eaten, huh? You see the rib is completely intact. The potato is intact. You see a piece of chicken intact. And a skewer, mshkaki, completely intact. And this person has completed eating. Is this proper eating? No. So technically speaking, this is fasada. It is wasteful eating. You never needed this food, so you should not have taken this food. Usually when you do this, you should take your food, whatever you left, take it home with you and then eat it at home. That is a proper behavior for a Muslim, but for everybody else. If we do it like that, our lives are going to be much, much better because we are not going to be wasteful in our lives. This is something we don't want to talk about, but it is an issue. I remember about 3 months ago, I met a guy, a Pakistani guy, I was working with him, and he asked me this question: why is it normal here for children to be born out of wedlock? And I said, no, it's part of our lives nowadays. It's happening in every family. It does happen in every family. Why? Because we have tolerated corruption. Technically, sex out of wedlock is corruption. It is not the way God meant for that to be done. So this is an example of corruption as well. And I know you have a lot of other examples as well. This is just the beginning to provide us a broad definition of what is accepted and what is not accepted in our daily lives. We'll come back to a few more slides a little bit later. And these are things, as Muslims, we need to be saying. Look at that slide there. It says, if the hour of resurrection is about to be established, the parapet is sounding, and you have a seedling on your hand. The hadith said, plant the seed. Plant the seed. You know the hour is arriving. The hour of judgment is arriving. I'm losing that, huh? Oh, okay, back. What is the problem? Maybe it's here. Okay, so the last hour, plant the seed. Plant. You know, it may not grow. Possibly one may not grow. It is not your business. Just plant the seed. Growth of the seed is not your problem. Just plant the seed. That is how sensitive we should be to environmental concerns. But if each of us was doing this, life in this world would have been quite okay. And here is another example which encourages people to plant trees in terms of fruit trees, trees that can produce seeds that birds can eat, trees that are beneficial. Plant any tree, anybody eats from that tree, you get the benefit. You get the thawab, and inshallah in the future you get your benefit of that. So planting trees is extremely important for us as human beings, and that is the way God meant for us to run in this world. Remember, we are viceroys in this world. That is why you can go and slaughter a cow. Who gave you permission to slaughter a cow? It is God who gave you permission to slaughter a cow, because you have a viceroy, you can use these resources, but you need to look after the resources as well. Removing harmful things on the roads, misumari, whatever you see that is harmful on the road, you remove that, you get your reward as well. So that is extremely important, because it is also part of being good in this world. And then finally you see these two examples, looking after animals, extremely important as well. These are examples of being good from the Quranic perspective. So feeding more in terms of the broad definition of corruption. And here you see the contrast. Huh? In literature, corruption is defined as dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power, typically involving bribery. And that, from my perspective, is a very limited definition of corruption. Because if it does involve bribery, it is not corruption. If I was going to define this, I would say dishonest or fraudulent conduct by anybody, whether they're in power or not in power. That would have been, for me, a much broader definition. But you see the lack of depth in our literature definition. That is why I thought we should start with the broad definition of corruption, which in my view is much more beneficial for us as human beings. I know some of you may not have heard of the Quran. What I'm encouraging you to do is, if you see it in that book a little bit later, go to the surah there and then start to read it. You'll see quite a lot of sense in what we're saying here. I think I'm touching this. HDMI, okay, that's okay, good. I'm not going to go that side. So that is the definition. And now we're going into the scale of corruption within Africa. You see the reference there. Copy that and then you'll go and read. This is the Mbeki report. The Mbeki report came to a conclusion that in Africa we lose a lot of money because of corruption. IFF is illicit fund flows from Africa account for about 65% of our commercial activities. And 30% is criminal activities, and 5% of that is from corruption. In total, they're talking about $50 million every month. $50 million, I think $50 billion every month, not million, $50 billion every month. A lot of money within the African context is lost through corruption. Maybe you can read that a little bit later. But I'm going through a little digression here to set up the context of corruption within Africa, comparing where we are in 1950s with where, for example, Asia was in the 50s as well. So when you look at Asia versus Africa, you'll see that we were all colonies in the late 50s. And we have differences in terms of our belief systems, in terms of our thought processes, the words that were being given in the 60s, and the action that we took. 50 years forward, Africa still is very precarious balance. We have a huge leadership void. We are divided, and there is basically no growth in our economies. So we have become basket cases for poverty. We have become basket cases for a lot of things that are not good. While in Asia, you look at Singapore, it has become a very good success story. Why? Why is that? And I only offer two reasons. One is we did not push for technological diffusion in our lives. And number two, we never had strong, sound, consistent, thought-led leadership. Those two reasons only. Now, I give this example. 1990, when I was in Dublin, I went to a supermarket and I saw jackfruit, Fenesi, in a can. Jackfruit in a can. I bought the can, and you see the can, a cooperative in Malaysia was producing that jackfruit. 1990, a cooperative in Malaysia was producing that jackfruit. Exported to Dublin, 1990. What do we do with jackfruits here? We are processing a bit. If you went out down the street, you'll see along Independence, which is, which street now, Independence? Samora, yeah, sorry. We were here many years ago, so I know this is Independence. Samora Avenue. Samora Avenue, if you go this way, you'll see boys processing jackfruit. What do? They cut it in pieces, they take the fruit, the seeds is taken out, and then they package it in plastic sheets. And then the sheets are sold to you 1,000 shillings. Can you export that? You cannot. So our technology is very, very feudal. We're still in the feudal mode in technology in these countries, not only Tanzania, but the whole of Africa, while our colleagues in Asia, they have moved much, much faster. And that is the reason why we are backward still today. Number two, look at our fishing industries. In the Indian Ocean, 30 people leave in the morning or in the evening on a boat, and they'll spend the whole night. They'll spend the whole night in the seas, and they'll come back in the morning with a catch. They'll sell the catch and get maybe 60,000, 70,000. 60,000 divided by 30 people, you get 2,000 shillings. And they've been doing it years in, year out for many, many years. And nobody sees that as a problem. So our industries are very, very backward. Even the processing of fish. You go to the ferry there, how do they process fish? It's kuni and the frying trays. And that is what you call feudal. Fire was discovered just before the feudal mode. Fire in the Stone Age. Just after Stone Age, we discovered fire. And then we are processing fish today using exactly the same process. And that for me is very, very backward. Our people, they come all the way up to the shores of Tanzania. They catch the fish, they package the fish, and they sell the fish to us. Kibua wa Kichina, we buy the fish. But they have industrial operation. A ship that can process its own ice. They'll go for a whole week without coming back to shore, process the fish, and then sell the fish. That is how you need to go about developing a fishing industry. We don't do that. So number one, our technological diffusion is very, very low. Not only in fishing, but even in farming, we don't do technology in farming. We should do that, and that will become the basis for us to develop. That is number one. Number two, thought-led leadership. If you assess Mwalimu Nyerere, Mzee Mwinyi, Ben Mkapa, JK, Magu, and currently we don't have enough time to assess. If you look at the 5 phases, I think only one, my own view is only Mwalimu gave us thought-led leadership. Thought-led leadership. The rest, they didn't give us any thought-led leadership. And therefore, you cannot have a basis to develop. I remember Mzee Mwinyi gave us hope, definitely, a lot of hope. Because before him, nobody could believe they could do business. And then when Mwinyi came, all of us thought we could do business. But we did business in a bad way. I had a brother here who will sell stationery in the morning. The same stationery will come back to his office in the afternoon and sell the stationery again. So that is basically theft. But it was allowed at that time, people would do business like that, and that was not a proper way to do business. So my view is that was not very well thought of leadership. Mkapa, similarly, I don't think he gave us thought. It was good, but he never gave us thought. You see later, I'm suggesting that his phase was the thuggish government, because that was the only time where we had civilians getting killed by people from the government without any explanation. And that for me is thuggish behavior. And then, of course, we had to go through JK. I don't know, but I don't think he had a very well thought out strategy how to push this country forward. But I mean, a lot of credit is given to him. And then, of course, the late Magufuli. I don't think there's any clarity in terms of what he wanted to do. My view is a lot of what he did was not very well intended for this country. We'll see as we go on, but I think there are a lot of problems there as well. So in summary, we didn't have very good thought-led leadership in this country. As a result, we have struggled. When you look at Singapore, leadership of that country was best and was consistent throughout. You could see merit, and people who were good got the jobs and they did their job properly. People who were bad, they got punished and punished properly. If there was a power cut, you can only power cut once. After that, the ministry responsible for energy loses the job, and the next minister will be told, look, you're given this ministry, I don't want to see a power cut going forward, it is your job. And that ministry will make sure that there are no power cuts, and there will be no power cuts. That's the way you want to run a government, but we don't do it like that. I know countries that have never had a power cut, never had a power cut. But we do have power. In Morogoro, we have power cuts 16 hours for 3 days running. So my view is we do not have thought-led leadership across in this country, but also in other countries as well. Towards the end there, you see Peter Eke, 1975. Peter Eke, 1975, he published a paper, and that's the title of the paper, Colonialism and Two Publics in Africa, a Theoretical Statement. Very briefly, what he says is, before colonization, Africa was perfect in terms of the morals of people in public and the morals of people privately. But with colonial education and the emerging of the civil servants, our morals in the civil service became different from our morals in the pre-model public. So the civic public and the pre-model public. In the pre-model public, we got nothing, but we gave a lot. My view is pre-model public is our local government, and civic public is our central government, to put it in context of Tanzania. So then it was okay to steal from the civic public to benefit privately and to benefit the local government. but it was unethical to steal from the local government, because the local government put you through school. The KNCU in Moshi put you through primary school, put you through secondary school, put you through college. So how could you come back and steal from the local government? So the local government was suckered, while the central government, you could steal from the central government. That is what was emerging in the early 60s, 70s onwards. What I see now is you can also steal from the local government. What we see that nowadays, people can steal from the local government because it is not actually local. It is not actually. Local is where you came from. So Machame employed a boy from Machame to lead the local government in Machame. So he was leading locally. But nowadays, a guy from Beira will be leading a local government in Dar es Salaam. So he has no morals in the local. So he will steal from the local. So what we see now is the person is not prevented from stealing from the local government, and that is not proper. This is what Peter Eke was saying in 1975. I'm bringing it into the context of Tanzania as we have it now, and I think it makes quite a lot of sense. But did we have no problem in the before colonial past? We did. When you went to the chief, you went with a cow, a goat, and from where I'm coming from, that perhaps was corruption. Was it not? I mean, we will, in our tribe, we'll say that is okay, it's not a problem. But I think now that looks like to be a problem, as then it was. And then perhaps we'll go to the main ones, manifestation of corruption, and I'm going to define manifest. This is the definition of manifest. To show something clearly through signs, process. So when I say corruption in the minds of executives and managers, what I mean is these executives and managers have thought through something and acted in a way that we now say it was corrupt. And I have examples here. People who were otherwise brilliant, I know them, I worked with them in the University of Dar es Salaam. They were appointed to political posts, and they have been transformed significantly into people who are completely uncritical of anything. And you say, why is that? It is happening because in their minds, they have become corrupt. And this, for me, is the main form of corruption we have in Tanzania and maybe within Africa. Look at the case of COVID-19. I remember that case of the vice chancellor of the university who gave a warning to people that, look, be careful. This thing is running about here, so vaa barakoa, keep your distance, do this, do this, do this. And that guy is a professor. And then the next day, he was given a warning. He was given a warning by his council, by his council. Now the council must have sat, gone through a thought process and decided that whatever the vice chancellor did was wrong. But there's nothing wrong with what he did. But because their minds were corrupt, they brought themselves to a position where they could say, retract the statement and offer an apology. What is the basis for that? There's no basis. But he retracted the statement and offered an apology. My view is that is a very good example of corruption of the minds. You have your own examples. You have your own examples of corruption in the minds. I don't need to give you examples anymore. You have your own examples. So that is number one. We have 6 slides like this, but corruption of our minds is extremely important and number 1 in my view. Number 2 is corruption in politics and electioneering. Manifestation. We saw this. I saw it. I don't know if you saw it, but you see the 2 countries there, Ukanda and Magunia. You have examples of candidates who are leading in the nomination processes, and they were number 1, and number 3 got appointed to contest, and number 1, number 2, number 3, they never got appointed. We never got any explanation. Only the executive decided, I'm going to appoint this one, finished. What is that? From where I'm coming from, that is corruption. Because it's selective The guy selectively decided, I'm going to take this one, without offering any explanation. And the people who should have asked the question, they never asked any. And that is how people get their way into bullying everybody else. And number two, as you see there, social media. I don't know, but I can't get into my Twitter account. Maybe you can get into your Twitter account. I have a very strong VPN. With my VPN, I can get into some accounts. But up until this morning, I can't get into my Twitter account. Why? Why can't I get into my Twitter account? Nobody makes any noise. I expected the regulators to act on this. The regulators are not acting on this. What are they acting on? They're acting a lot of noise on fees that have gone up, which is, in my view, not very well meant. Why? Because the regulators will get more money when fees go up. So it is not really well intended for them to say they're going to fight our case, because the higher the revenues, the more the revenues they'll be getting as well. But this is number two in terms of indicators, manifestation of corruption, politics, and electioneering. Number three is contract and procurement. And the largest area where money is spent in this country and other countries in large projects, contracting and procurement of items, maybe in defense and security, etc., or barely in purchasing of government assets. In this country, purchase of equipment. You know what equipment is? Aircraft is equipment. Aircraft is equipment. Technical term is equipment. Procurement of defense, security items, large projects, strategic projects. You know these projects. I suspect there must be quite a bit of corruption in that. Why? I had opportunity to see some of these things, and I remember about 2016, I battled hardly. I battled a lot to obtain 6 vouchers. 6 vouchers. And the 6 vouchers, somebody told me, no, don't bother about these 6 vouchers. You should not look at this. I said, no. My mandate requires me to vouch all government expenditure. So I can't take this explanation that you don't have the vouchers. Show me the vouchers. And they said the vouchers were at Ikulu. I said, I don't care. I want to see the vouchers, and I must be shown the vouchers. And eventually, I never got to see the vouchers for the time before reporting. And I included that in the reports to say there was severe limitation of scope, and therefore this vote that obtained what we call a disclaimer of opinion. We say we are not able to form an opinion because we're limited in scope. That's the technical term. Limitation in scope leads to disclaimer of opinion. And that was in the report, and I told a few people, look, this is what happened. And nobody picked that up. Nobody picked that up. And then, of course, after the report was submitted, I wrote a very strong letter to say, look, it is your responsibility as a permanent secretary to maintain financial records. You have a duty to do that. So please show me the vouchers within 7 days, or this matter is going to cease to be private. And, of course, that was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday morning, I got a phone call. Go to the ministry, you'll see the vouchers, and I'll send my people to the ministry, we got the vouchers, and things were done. Probably I produced a report, and nothing has happened to that report to date. So you see the level of what I'll call corruption. Because people will interfere and say, don't do that, and you say, no, I want to do that. You produce a report, and nothing happens to the report, and you say, this is very problematic. And that is why I say contracting and procurement is actually a big area where we may have corruption as well. I must add, I also requested in the past information on all the projects, feasibility studies. You cannot justify the investment in a rail system from here to Mwanza or Kigoma because you're going to be shifting tomatoes from Dodoma to Dar es Salaam. It doesn't make sense. Anybody who has some level of intelligence say, no. What load are you going to be carrying to justify such an investment? So you need a feasibility study to see the revenues coming in discounted against the cost you're going to incur today. And then you'll have a net present value positive, and then you say the return on investment is worth it. That is how you do feasibility studies, but there are other feasibility studies as well. And I got a single letter from 3 different ministries saying exactly the same, that you have not come to the end of the year, so we don't have the financial reports for you to audit, so maybe you wait until we do financial. And I said, look, my thinking is not financial audit. I'm doing here a technical audit, which is an audit of the idea and the audit of the processes, so that we can solve problems before they actually occur, or rectify problems before they actually have major impact. And everybody said, no, no. 3 letters from 3 different ministries, exactly the same way. And what I meant was that must have been collusion. That must have been collusion. I knew one of the peers. I spoke to him and said, what is this nonsense? And he tells me, oh, we met and this is what we decided we're going to do. So in government, they collude to do these kind of things because they want to protect corrupt practices in contracting and procurement. Maybe as we go forward, we might see these things. And this is number 4, I think. Tax revenue collection and fraud generally. Fraud generally. In the past, as you could see, people who were able to give money to the government got some tax breaks. Tax breaks will be, for example, ability to import rice when there's shortage, or ability to import sugar when there's shortage, or ability to import something when there's shortage, and they got preferential treatment. Now, in tax revenue, when you give preferential treatment, what happens is the desk officers will use that as a precedent. They use that as a precedent. Now, if they use it as a precedent, the higher officers will say, no, you cannot do that. And then the junior officers will say, okay, so you are limiting this to only this person. And that corrupts the junior officers. They say, oh, the seniors are getting money from this. Why can't we do our own things? And that is how the revenue service gets completely corrupted, because everybody is going to be looking after himself. And that, for me, is extremely worrying, because it has happened and continues to happen. When you give preferential treatment to one person, for me, that is corruption within the state. Corruption within the state. And then the junior officer will take it and use it as a precedent, and then you corrupt the entire system. And that is, as I said earlier, not a very good way to be doing tax collection. I see the last point there, major institutional funds occurred around the election cycle. I know something in 2000, something happened in 2005, 2010, 2015, even 2020. You don't know about it, but something happened in 2020. Give it time, we might know about it as well. And then, of course, number 5 is sectoral regulatory agencies. What I'm talking about here is the regulatory agencies like TCRA, things like EWURA, I think those are the 2 major ones. Huh? And what happened when they got established was these were actually taxing authorities. So they were taxing, they got their revenues, we never knew about their budget, and they could spend whatever they wanted. So you had these companies owning properties and developing properties in Tanzania. In Dar es Salaam, for example, TCRA used to be housed along Kawawa Road, what used to be Shihata. And there are 2 properties there. They refurbished them, they're quite nice properties, and then they got enough money to build that property in Sam Nujoma. Did they leave the other properties? No, they keep the properties, and they become landlords. And for me, that is not proper. The only way you want to run these revenue authorities, regulatory authorities, is to get them to submit a budget like everybody else in Parliament. This is what you want to do, this is what you need, and this is what you're going to be given as your budget. Collect everything, it goes centrally. I don't think that was done, but that is the proper way to run these regulatory authorities, and we never did it properly. As a result, there was quite a lot of what I'll call exaggerated, luxurious expenditures within these regulatory authorities. And from where I'm coming from, that is part and parcel of corruption. And then, of course, sadly, we have anti-corruption agencies. Ideally, this should not be happening here. I mean, they shouldn't be part and parcel of manifestation of corruption. They should be fighting corruption. But from the information we have, some of these institutions actually conduct themselves in very corrupt ways. You know about plea bargaining, this thing that is happening now, and what we hear is a big proportion of that money goes into private coffers. What I'll be interested is next year to see that the auditors actually vouch all monies collected from plea bargains and trace it all the way to make sure that it's all properly accounted for. But I know somebody here who is an assistant to one of the major oil companies, and every once in a while he gets called to an investigative organ, and that chap is very city-wise, so he'll go there. He knows very well what they need, is his boss, and he'll ask the price, and they tell him 60 million. He'll leave the office, goes, get the money, brings the money there, and the boss will be left for another 2-3 months, and then he's going to be called again. What is that? That is corruption. And this story I was told by the guy himself. So, you know, our investigative organs are quite corrupt institutions as well. Have you seen this? This was in newspaper. What are we talking about here? The 5 accused have been in custody since 2016, facing charges leading to organized crime, forgery, altering false documents, use of documents intended to mislead the principal, obtaining money by false pretenses, money laundering, occasioning loss to the government. They pleaded guilty to 1 count of occasioning loss to the government of some $6 million out of a total of 58 charges. They were facing before the High Court's Corruption and Economic Crime Division. They accused persons were today, August 26, released after paying 1.5 billion compensation to the government after they entered a plea bargain with Office of Director of Public Prosecution. Which case is this? This case is the case relating to emerging market growth company. Do you know that company? The emerging market growth company. This company was formed many years ago. I mean, after this, we formed the secondary, I don't think it was secondary market, but you have the index 1 in DSE, and then the second index for small and medium enterprises. And this company was formed as a player in that market after the first index, the second index. I know the 2 people who formed this, they were my teachers, Frat and Boyer, and who is the other one? Harry Kitili. Frat and Boyer and Harry, both were my teachers. They formed this company and they went on quite well. And then one day they are approached to facilitate a loan from Stanbic Bank, and they facilitated the loan, and on the basis of that, they got paid 2%. They got paid 2%. I hear this was approved by the cabinet. That is what I hear. It was approved by cabinet. I'm not sure, but that's what they say. It was approved by cabinet. One of those people told me it was approved by cabinet. And then the Syria Fraud Office in London picked this. I'm mentioning this because I'm going to show that there is a weakness in our institutions here. If the Syria Fraud Office in London can pick a transaction in Dar es Salaam, why our institutions in Dar es Salaam were not able to pick this? Either they're completely incompetent or they just decided to keep quiet. But as a result of this, in London, Stanbic Bank was fined, and they had to dislodge all the interest, and they entered into what they call a deferred prosecution agreement. And then they avoided jail. And then this side, we decided to bring action against these people, and they are the wrong people in my view. They are the wrong people. The right people would have been the cabinet, which made the decision, the permanent secretary, which executed the decision, the chief executive officers of the bank, not the junior officers. Well, we took everybody else who is junior and then they made them scapegoats, which is not the proper way of doing prosecution, but that is what they did. So I'm giving this example to show you that what is the equivalent of serious fraud office in Tanzania? Financial Intelligence Unit. Financial Intelligence Unit. That unit should have picked this. It was done in Dar es Salaam, and they never picked it. Why? I think on purpose, it is a very weak institution. It is a very weak institution because it doesn't have a very good leader, and it doesn't have enough staff as well. On purpose, it is less staffed. It doesn't have leadership because then it doesn't need to be very effective. But this is where we need to start if we're going to improve our fight against corruption. Improve leadership in serious fraud in the Financial Intelligence Unit, get it very good people, give it equipment, give it the system to run properly, to enter into bank systems and pick information and that kind of thing, and then we can have a proper running institution. So that is just an example. And now we can go into enablers of corruption. The first one is Peter Eke, which I just covered, so I'm not going to go into that again. The two publics, civic public and primordial public. The point we made earlier was people are now stealing in local government, which was said in the past, and that is not okay. But I think the last point is quite important. Do we need to go into lifestyle audit? We do need to. A lifestyle audit is an audit that is conducted on a person, And then we compare what you had when you got the appointment. And a lifestyle audit is going to be done when you end the appointment. And then we'll see now, in 1990, you had virtually nothing. In year 2000, you have 3 stories of buildings. You have a lakeside village full of structures. And then we'll ask you, where did you get the money to build 3 structures, 3 stories, and the money to put up a village of developed structures on the lake? And then, of course, you'll fail to explain. When you fail to explain, we'll say you obtain these resources by corrupt means. We don't have to prove anything else. And this is how they do in China. You have resources, you can't account for the resources, and therefore these are resources you got from corruption. And that is what you call a lifestyle audit. How have your lifestyle improved over time, and how can you account for your changing lifestyle? I think we need to do that in this country. We're already late and we should be doing this. So what we need is to develop competencies of how you do lifestyle audits, and therefore get people to start doing this. We are also proposing that we have inept legislative system. I see some lawyers here. A system, from my definition, year 1, management is a collection of a whole that it can be separated into units, and the units, they are distinct, but they operate as a whole to fulfill a certain objective. That is the definition of a system. So when we talk of a legislative system, we're talking of the legislation themselves, we're talking about the courts, we're talking about the legal personnel, we're talking about the recording and maintaining arrangement in the courts, we're talking about the investigative organs, the prosecution authorities, etc., etc. All those associated in running the legislative system is what we call a system. And what I'm proposing here is the system is inept. Why is it inept? Because it does not deliver for us what we call effective justice. It happens for a number of reasons. One, because of incomplete investigation, which you see quite a lot, unfair prosecutions that can be supported by evidence, we see that as well, fictitious and vindictive charges against targeted personalities, periodic arrests and disappearances of certain people and individuals, and then they reappear. When they reappear, something is offered as a gift or a present, and then they can live free. So these examples, and I'll show you a slide earlier of an evaluation by an academic from University of Cape Town over our legislative system. And the same conclusion that we don't do enough to improve this system. This is the same slide that you saw earlier. So if you plead guilty on one count, what happens to the 57? These were 58 counts. You plead guilty on one count, and the 57 all go away just like that. And this is what we call plea bargain. But the problem with the plea bargain is it is initiated at the highest level. Plea bargain in the US, it is initiated at the lowest level. When you get interrogated, you accept admission, and people will tell you, okay, if you do this, perhaps we can reduce your 10 cents like this. And then you enter a plea bargain, and that is entered, and that is how you get your relief from the lowest level. But here we do it from the highest level. Why the highest level? Because that level needs a lot of benefits as well. That is my theory. At the highest level, that is where the benefits are needed. And this is where we see the slide of thuggish government behavior. And you see the example there on unlawful killing of civilians. This happened in the past, you know that. Policemen actually killed people in this country and took their personal belongings. Eventually they are taken to court, and some, I think one of those has been sentenced to death, and the rest have gone away free. But it happened. It happened in this country. And this is what I call thuggish behavior. Framing charges against individuals is equally thuggish. As you saw in Parliament, people will come to you. I know a case of somebody in Arusha who bought a property from a parastatal, and not only in Arusha and Dar es Salaam, where it's the same case, where somebody goes from PSRC, a property, and they kept it for 10 years running. They invested a bit, and now 15 years later, the government is really interested in these properties, and the government wants the property back. So what does the government do? It goes to these people and say, look, here is a series of charges. They went through his history, so they have money laundering, they have forgery, they have avoiding taxes. They have a lot of these charges. They say, look, you give us the property, or these are the charges we're going to lay against you. So some people are very afraid, and they say, okay, I don't want to go to police, so take it. And then they take it. For me, that is thuggish criminal behavior by a government. If you tolerate that, then nothing is going to be acceptable. So I know a case in Arusha where somebody this was done to somebody, and he said, my dad went through the Economic Sabotage Act in 1982, stayed in jail for many, many years. So for me, I learned that experience that my dad could go in jail, and I stayed, and we made our money. No problem, take me to jail. I'm not going to give this property up. And he got off scot-free. He still owns the property today. But very few people have that kind of attitude. Other people just give way, and they'll lose their property. I'm saying this is thuggish behavior. We can't tolerate a government that does this kind of thing to its own citizens, because this is basically improper. And then, of course, lip service to blatant wrongdoing. And I have a quotation here from Nyerere. I remember very well, I heard this. Barongo amekamata kukutwa na kalaki tu. Some of you were not there, but I was there. I heard this myself. So Nyerere was paying lip service to Barongo, who was the RC of Dar es Salaam, I remember at that time. Because he was found with 100,000 shillings cash, and he was put in jail, in detention. And Mwalimu said 100,000 is a little money. leave him out, and he was left out. But he forgot that some people with Pepsodent were rotting in jail. So this is what you call selective memory. You select what is suitable for you. So he liked Barongo. Barongo is not going to be spending his time in jail, so he got him out because of this statement, Katukupa Nakalaki too. But he forgot about a lot of other people who were rotting in jail because of some even small things. And this was the beginning of paying lip service to what we see today. It's the same thing, huh? You have people who said Form 4 certificates. A lot of people got sacked, but some people never got sacked. It's the same behavior. You say this is the principle, and you never follow the principle. That, from our broad definition, is an example of corruption. You like it or you don't like it, that was corruption. And this is important, opaque operations in an era of transparency. The point you are making here is currently you see a lot of digitization in government, a lot of digitization. You pay for anything, you can do it electronically, which is excellent. I really commend that. Very good for the government to go digitization. In the past 5 years that was done, and was done very, very well. My point is that has got to go backwards. As the government decides, we should also see. So they collect the money. When they spend the money, we should also see. This conversation now that the Bagamoyo project was good, we should have seen when the project was being floated. So the proposal, all of us should have seen the proposal, and all of us should have been able to evaluate the benefits of the proposal, so that nobody will tell us it's not a good proposal, because we can see the benefits. In any case, our lives are always a negotiation. Remember, even crossing a road is a negotiation. So in negotiation, you'll be told conditions. You sit down, you offer counter conditions, and finally you come to an agreement. That is how negotiations are done. You don't receive conditions and say, no, impossible. Nobody will accept it. Of course, but offer your condition, and then you can meet somewhere in the middle. That is how you negotiate. It is not just, oh, no, I'm not going to consider this. And we accepted it. We accepted it. Only now we are going to do revisions, which is not a very good way to run a government. And the other point I'm making here is, and this is important, I recall about 4 years ago, I met a chap from Norway, and on his phone, he could show me allocation of deep sea plots in Norway for oil exploration in Norway, on his phone. So I can see here allocation in Norway, on my phone. That is how transparent governments need to be. But here we don't see anything. So the point I'm making here is, if you want us to be involved, then let us see everything that is happening within government. It is not okay to say this is confidential. It is not confidential. Anything that happens in the cabinet cannot be confidential. Let us see it. And then we'll say Minister Y said this, Minister X said this. And this is the way we see openness in government. We don't see that. But in developed countries, that is how they operate. I remember a case of some theft that happened when I was in office, and some people presented an invoice of 3 million as 30 million, money that we got from Sweden. And the Swedish got to know this. So they told me there is forgery here. And I sent people, and they did a proper investigation. They came with the report, and I submitted a report to the government, also to the ambassador of Sweden here. And then later the Swedes were going to publish that information to everybody. And then I got told, look, tomorrow it's going to appear in all newspapers in Sweden. And I said, how come? I thought we are negotiating this privately. I said, no. If you communicate with me on email, that email is public property. Anybody in Sweden can see that email. If you don't want to do that, then you need to open a court case in Stockholm to argue a case why that should be private. And I said, we can't do that. And of course, that information became public in Norway. In Sweden, sorry, became public in Sweden. But here, nobody got to know about it. But that is how openness can help. And that is the case I'm arguing, that we need to open everything. But when you have confidential stuff, that is where thieving actually starts. I'll show you an example a little bit later now, and we'll see this. Here are some blatant examples. You know Gerezani, where there is bus rapid transport, Kariako, Gerezani terminal. What was there before the terminal? Do you know? Before the terminal, you had railway quarters. Railway quarters, Class C railway quarters there. You have Class A, Class B, and Class C. I think Class C were railway quarters there. The lower classes are the ones you see in the gangs in the railway system. Those are the lowest. And then the second lowest were Class C, and then you Class B, Changombe, and then Class A, you have them in the Central Business District, just besides this hotel there. Those are Class A quarters. Class C quarters were sold to tenants at 6 million apiece. 6 million apiece. 6 million apiece. Even the ones in Changombe, I think, 6 million apiece. And then within 3 months, the rapid bus transport project came up, and the government required to buy those properties again. How much did they pay? 260 million apiece. 260 million apiece. And you were going to ask, what nonsense is this? But it happened. So the question here is, why did you sell government properties at 6 million while their worth was 260 million? Who made such a decision? If you ask now, you will be told the cabinet made the decision. The cabinet made the decision initially because they were the beneficiaries of disposal of government property, because they were the tenants. So how can you have a cabinet decide on a matter that they have direct interest? That will not happen anywhere else, but it happened in this country. Nobody questions that. So that for me is extremely important that we ask some questions. I'm going to show you some photographs here. What you see there is what I call family silver. Kawe, a bit of Kawe, Masaki, Sasani, Regency, Ada Estate, Oyster Bay, Ocean Road, Central Business District, and some properties in Kurasini. All these were areas where we had government residential properties, and they were sold the same way value. That was the price they sold. A property in Oyster Bay, 30 million shillings, and now you won't get it less than $1 million. Not less than $1 million. Why did we do that? And what I'm saying here is somebody had their own interest in this, and if we have a working system, this question needs to be asked, and nobody is asking these questions. I did a paper on this, and if you don't get anybody else to present, next month I'm going to do a presentation on just disposal of government properties. You see this? This is Masaki. Yeah? You see this area here? I'm going to show you the next slide, and you're going to see that this area here is now gone. Is now gone. There, you see? This area has been cleared. This area has been cleared. Do we know about it? We don't. I did this photograph just a week ago. That old photograph was, this photograph was done about 10 years ago. And about a week ago I did this photograph, and you can see some of the properties in Masaki has been cleared. You know who is the occupant there? It's the army. The army occupies that corner of Masaki because there are some batteries there for defense of the city. So what happened for this part to be taken up? What process was undertaken? Nobody knows about it. I don't know. I know Mzee Kasongo lives around here. Maybe he may know. But this property is now taken up, and it is now residential. So what process was undertaken? We don't know. In a proper working democracy, this information should be asked, and we should be getting answers. It's not enough to say no decisions are made. How were the decisions made? Who made the decision? Who benefits from this decision? They are very important questions we need to be asking. We don't ask those questions. You see some more photographs here of the same. And this, I think, more or less the last one, acquired stupidity. And here is the definition of being stupid. Nyerere mentioned this and says stupid is an attribute like being tall or being short. You remember that clip, huh? Silly, unwise, showing poor judgment or little intelligence. That is what stupidity is all about. So, as we can see, it is not internally consistent, but it is a term that I think is right for me to use now because of what we have been able to see in the recent past. Otherwise, you cannot explain why people who are otherwise intelligent taking stupid decisions. They must have acquired this attribute. It is not fit for them, but they must have acquired this attribute, which is very sad. So you see on paper people are very, very intelligent, but they make decisions that do not make sense. I've seen a professor of botany who goes on public to say COVID does not exist, without any indications as to why it does not exist. And he has seen people die. And you say, why is he doing this? It's a guy you know, he's very intelligent, but he's saying something which for me is really stupid. And this for me is what we call acquired stupidity. And you have a lot of other examples. I don't need to mention them, but you see them every now and then. And this perhaps is very, very sad. My view is, I think about 56-60% of people in service are not fit for purpose, which means we have to go through what I call a reformatting, not rebooting, a reformatting of the government. Get rid of a lot of people and start afresh. I'm going to talk about that as part of the cure going forward. And this is another case of enablers, weak investigative tools and competencies. And I'm going to show you an example here. This is a quotation from Cape Town. You can read it. 3 academics from the University of Cape Town did a study. As a result of that study, this is their conclusion. The point here is about 50% of the decision of the High Court threw out cases because of major defects during the trial from junior courts. And that is all. They are questioning why is Tanzania's highest court or the judiciary, the justice authorities, not doing anything to rectify these problems? That is where the question is. If we have serious faults in the lower courts, the onus to rectify is on the judiciary, but also on the Ministry of Justice. And they do nothing. This is the problem. And they demonstrate that it's a systemic problem that we don't resolve. And I'm thinking very broadly, basically because of state capture. There is not sufficient independence from these organs to be able to do things on their own. You remember the case of somebody saying, I'm giving this money, but you have to make sure that you make judgments that help us generate more money. What do you expect? You expect straight away the head of that unit to confront the guy and say, look, my friend, my work is very independent. You have a duty to facilitate me and give me enough resources to run my department. And I run my department the way I'm supposed to run my department. I don't need you to interfere with the way I'm going to be running my department. You do that in day one, day two, they will never do that again. But we seem to tolerate this kind of behavior. We've tolerated for a long time, and then you lose your independence. It's a serious problem, which I faced, but I'm not that kind of person. So I'll speak my mind, and people don't like it, and you live with the consequences. But here is another example. That's not a Tanzanian policeman, huh? You know that, huh? It can't be a Tanzanian policeman. What do you see there? You see a cordon. You see the policeman has gloves, and he's carrying something. Remember that. I'll show you another program. Here's another photograph. The story about this photograph is Honorable Nape lost his pistol. And his pistol was a Glock. Anybody who knows one or two things about prison will know what a Glock is. If you look at that, what's wrong with that photograph? It's contamination. It is contamination. And you see that all the time. When you have a theft of a car, the police stop. Do they come with gloves? No. They just open the door, try a key, and that is contamination evidence. They do that all the time. Why? Because they don't have the right skills and competencies. And if you do that, and you go to a court of law, you're going to lose the case. So this is number one. We have weak competencies and skills in our system. I'm going to show you a Glock. Huh? That is a Glock. You see the difference between that Glock and that pistol at the top? A Glock is just like a Glock. Very well designed. I don't know how many of you have a pistol, but this is a Glock. It's the Mercedes of pistols. Very good machine. But you see, that is, the top one is what we call CZ75. A CZ75 is a good machine as well, but if Mabosasa says we captured the pistol that was stolen from Nape, and you show me a photograph of CZ, and I can see that is a CZ, that is not a Glock. So the impression you are giving is you are mediocre in your work. And that is not proper. It is part and parcel of what we call corruption. We are doing just a little bit more than 1 hour now. Please bear with me, I'll be finishing soon. And critical here is the three roles of collecting evidence, preservation of evidence, and submission of evidence in courts of law. If you fall in any of those three, your court case is going to be weak. And these are the three areas where I think we're extremely weak. And I think it is the role of the judiciary and the Ministry of Justice to make sure that all our investigative organs are very good in these three aspects. Of course, the result of everything else we have said is what is coming last. The shortage of ethical conduct and courage. Because of all that we say, this is the result. We have very few people who are ethically anchored and can stand on matters of principle. And they cannot do it because of fear of the appointing authority, but also fear of loss of status and fear of loss of benefit, which I think these are big fears. Huh? Loss of status. You remember the clip by Pole Pole saying that all the officials are going around in V80, full AC? That's a lot for a lot of people. And they don't want to lose that. So they'll shut up because they won't keep their job. And that for me is what lets down this country. If everyone was spoke their mind and said that is wrong, we will be much safer. But we have no courage, which is extremely important for us to be able to do. I'm going to be rushing now. And then we're going to go into cures. What you see here is reboot and reformat. Reboot is to start something again, or do something again in a way that is new and interesting. In a computer, it affects random access memory. Reformat is you erase all information in the drive by formatting the drive to prepare the disk to be used for another data. Reformat is commonly performed to correct a major data corruption, check to see the disk is bad, or clean the disk drive. Usually, when you reformat, normally, when you reformat, you cannot retrieve anything from the hard disk. Normally, you don't. You are not able to. I know the CIA can do it, but a lot of us, you can't. With reformatting, you're gone. You have to start again. What I'm proposing here is this country needs a reformat, not a reboot. And reformatting means get rid of everybody and start afresh. Get rid of everybody and start afresh. As I said earlier, I think 50-60% of the people we have are not fit for finance. I know a guy who could not look after my 17 vehicles, and is now a district commissioner. How can you do that? But those are things that can be allowed to happen. So we need to reformat this country going forward rather than just rebooting. And how do we do that? Number one, we need to work on the spirit of individuals, but also we need to work on our children. This is a long shot, but it's the only way we can go forward. Most of us are casual liars. Most of us are casual liars. I remember one day I was invited to on Hill Park. Somebody got a phone call and said, well, I'm at fire here. And they are not at fire, they are at the University of Islam. And because of this, be truthful by starting at, say, madrasa or early school education. That saying the truth is the way to go. Never tell a lie to anybody for any reason. And then these people grow to become much more important individuals for going forward. Another 50, 40 years to come, this country is going to be full of people who are very well behaved. And that is where we need to start. Of course, as I said earlier, we need to enhance transparency, completely enhance transparency. So whatever is happening in government, we should all know. So there is a project for Bagamoyo. All of us should see the project. If the proposal comes from China, it should be available for all of us to see, and then we can see the benefits. We can also see the cost of that project, and then we can get involved in discussion and say, this is a good project, or this is not a good project. What we have now is somebody saying, this is not a very good project, and now we have a revision, so maybe we can consider it again. But are these people still there? They're not there. So you have to go and negotiate from a very weak position, which will not give you anything. So enhancing transparency without any boundaries or limits is extremely important if you're going to have a cure. Of course, we have tough legislations, but we need even tougher legislation. I'll give you the example of the mafia in the 90s in New York. They were very, very strong, but then they instituted the Racketeering and Income from Corrupt Organization Act. They call it the RICO laws. And the RICO laws would send you life in prison. Life in prison. So you have the bosses, and the junior bosses, they call them the capos, and then the soldiers. If a soldier was caught, and there was enough evidence to send him out for life, and the FBI will offer him something if he provided information. He needs to compare life in prison against snitching against some of his people. If you're going to offer him witness protection, change in ID, change in location, whatever, and that was offered, the soldiers would be willing to do that. And the soldiers actually sold out secrets on their capos and their bosses. And that is how the mafia was defeated. very strong legislation, and then you encourage people at the lower end to provide evidence against the people at the top end, and then the case becomes successful, and that is how they did the RICO laws and solve the problem on the market in New York. We should do the same here. You know, the RICO laws, they'll catch you with your properties. And then the onus to prove it is there, these are your properties on you, not on the prosecutor. Show us where you got the money for it. If you can't show us, by implication, it is stolen, racketeering, and the money belongs to the government. Straight away. These are tough laws, and these are the kind of laws we need in this country as well. Of course, severe punishment is just what I was just mentioning. But not only punishment, we also need to reward people properly. And here is a quote from our friend, Umma. I saw it, I think, last week. In Japan, a black person commits suicide. In Japan, they'll commit suicide. In China, they'll take him to a firing squad. In Africa, they'll come for an election. That is how tolerant we become of corruption. I think this is true for most of us. It's true. People with solid money, they eventually came and became MPs, and then they run, and then they become ministers, and then they supervise whatever they did wrong, which is not the way to go. I think we are coming almost towards the end. And the last one is, as I said earlier, rewarding courage and independence. So if you're going to punish in a tough way, we also have got to remember to reward people who are doing it properly. So the people who are doing it wrongly, they get punished, but the people who are doing it properly, they need to be properly rewarded, not punished. And I think this is the last article we have today. And I want to thank you very, very much, my friend, for making up the time this morning and listening to me. I think this should be a conversation. But since I was at the top, I needed to deliver this, and then you can ask any questions that you have. I don't know who is going to be running question and answer session, but here's my thank you very, very much. No problem. Kama una swali la slide na slide number, I will bring the slide back. No problem.
Thank you very much, Professor, for a nice and very good presentation. I think I've got, for myself, I've got a lot of things of which I accepted to get from you. That's why I did not dare to miss this presentation. I have some questions here. I don't know the slides, but I think I will be presenting my questions. You were the CAG to the last government of the late John Magufuli. And when the aircrafts were bought in cash, you were the CAG. And when you were presenting, you said in auditing, you sometimes audit the ideas and processes. What is your view on this purchase or procurement of the aircraft of those types, as you were there also auditing the ideas and processes? What were your positions on that? Number two, we have heard currently one of the leaders of one of the pillars of the government say of, I'm quoting of your last presentation, trying to say that the Bagamoyo project should be reconsidered. But during the past period, he was one of the members who was supporting that the project should not be considered. And currently he's saying that the project should be considered. What is your comment as far as the separation of power in pillars of the government is concerned, but also as far as corruption of minds to the executives is concerned, as per your presentation? Thank you.
Three questions.
Next question.
Assalamu alaikum. Professor, I've got two questions, nice and simple. The first one, when you're talking about to reform it, if we do that, first, who will do it, and who will be faced with it? That's number one. Number two, black tie. Who will have the guts to point a finger to someone and ask him or her about lifestyle when he himself, I think, will not be comfortable if somebody asks him the same question? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for the nice presentation. Mine is a concern. I can summarize, if I got you well, I can summarize the presentation as you are still advocating for strong institutions. But my problem is philosophical. These strong institutions are made by people. So I don't know, how are you going to make them strong if you are blaming the same people who make these strong institutions?
Thank you very much. We can start, I think. Thank you very much. I think I'm edible. You can hear me. Thank you very, very much. Question number one from my friend here. I think I must go on record. I was appointed CAG December 2014. December 2014. But because of a technicality, that office cannot be vacant for 90 days. So since Uto had left, 90 days were already passed. So theoretically, my letter was dated 5th of November 2014. Although my appointment technically was December, and I took the oath in. But your question is, my role in the acquisition of equipment by Air Tanzania. And I'm going to be very frank. I'm always frank. I'm going to be very frank. I was involved in the study of Air Tanzania even before I became the CEO. I did quite a lot of work for the government when I was in University of Dar es Salaam. And one of my last assignments was a study of Air Tanzania and its business plan. It was myself, I remember the name, the late MP for Tanga, Nungu was in the team. I remember a lady from University of Dar es Salaam, I don't think I mentioned her name now, but she was in the team. And somebody else. Three of us, four of us. We wrote a report. And part of the mandate was to study whether the agency could be revived. And to cut a very long story short, Air Tanzania was a company that was buying its fuel in cash. Its fuel in cash. And in airline operations, fuel is extremely important. And the most important relationship in an airline is your relationship with the fuel suppliers. These are the people who should be able to trust you to give you fuel, and you pay them maybe in the year's time. But they should be able to give you fuel. Air Tanzania was not able to get fuel unless paid cash. So it has no reputation whatsoever with its suppliers. It has a lot of stuff that demanded a lot of money from him, payments or not paying for stuff, technical stuff. So strictly speaking, my view is that was already a bankrupt organization. And when I became CAG, I remember very, very well. Basically, I will send a letter saying, what are my personal views on Air Tanzania? And I'm on record to say, no, don't do anything to this company. If anything, let us sell the company, pay creditors, not fully, because if you sell the company, you sell the aircraft, you sell that building there as well, and then you pay creditors a proportion of what you get. That is how you bankrupt an organization. This organization is now dead, we don't have Air Tanzania. My suggestion was not to buy any aircraft with this company, but instead, if you wait a few years, we should be able to give you 2 aircraft, Embraer, medium-range aircraft, and give you 2 officers at the airport, and management will stay at the airport, and they will see their operation, and then they can grow natural. That was my position, and it's a position that has been given in writing. So I never supported purchase of equipment. In any case, anybody with the money will not support paying cash for equipment. Because all airlines, even the richest ones, Emirates, they never pay. Even if they have mountains of cash, you never pay. Cash can be used, there's something called matching. Huh? You match your long-term assets against long-term liabilities. So if you're buying an asset that's going to be there for 30 years, you match it against an obligation to pay that's going to be equivalent to 30 years. That is proper money. If you use cash, you're not matching. You're using cash to buy equipment that is going to last for 30, 40 years. From where I'm coming from, it fits one of our slides. It is essentially a stupid. You shouldn't do that. And I remember asking a minister that question. Because we had a problem with budget. I told the minister, what is this? You can't find enough money for me? I can't because of these commitments we have given them. We have bullet payments, commitments, and on and on. Why do you accept to pay bullet commitments? You bought equipment and you're paying cash, you should do it. Or it is part of collective responsibility, which is nonsense. But we can say, disagree on something, put it in writing, argue against. If it is not supported, what is the option? Resign. Honorable, resign, say, I am seriously disagreeing on this matter, here is my position, and I'm with resign because of this. But because of fear of loss of status and position, people don't resign. And that is what happened. And now we are going to be very, very sorry, because I'm sure one of these days, Air Tanzania is going to go down. Despite having all it is not going to be sustainable. I can tell you today, give it a few more years, it is going to be a dead organization. Thank you very much. The next question, I think, is the Kasongo. Reformat, who will do it? I mean, right now, we have a leader who I think is willing to reformat. He is not reformatting yet, but I think given time and given advice, she should be able to reform it. So that's the only way. That's the only way. I mean, if you look at civil service, largely you have people who should not have been there and they are there. In the past, you know your career progression. You start at this level, you come to this level, you come to this level, and then you know of the 3 of us, 1 of us will be promoted. That is career. Right now, you're somebody we pick from SUA to become the CEO of some organization he doesn't know anything about. And that is not career progression. So we need to go back to the basics. How do you move people within government and do it properly? And that is the only way we're going to lose. And my suggestion is the top executive of this organization, this country, should have the back shoes up there. We fail, she should fail. I think it's going to be important. Some of others were one question. The other question was lifestyle audit, not comfortable. I know we are not comfortable, but we should be able to do it. We should get somebody who will say, no, I'm starting to do it. and then the result will be shown, and then effects will be there, and then somebody else will do it. We need to start. And the best way of doing it is to start on your own. So suppose I think my suggestion is the Ethics Secretariat and the National Audit Office, these two institutions that get together and start the Ethics Secretariat and the National Audit Office, they should put together a plan and say, well, this is the cabinet. Okay, this cabinet, we are going to do a lifestyle audit of all of them. Maybe we will start with deputy minister, all deputy ministers, and next year we do this for all senior managers. And then it gets done. And then it becomes public, all of us know. But I think it's a genuine problem. Who is going to do it? Because everybody is coming. Everybody is punished. But I mean, some people are more punished than others. So maybe we start with the lower one, and then they get punished. Maybe they lose some property, and then they settle, and then somebody else gets up also, we audit, and they get punished as well. And then it becomes known. Internet is known. Every 5 years or so, somebody gets up, and then they're shown the firing squad. So they stole too much money. And I think it's secure. Then you stop to lay these claims. Somebody showed yesterday, I didn't see it myself, but I think I was home. He said, okay, this means I was paid for transport allowance, and was given transport as well. And that is from where I'm coming from corruption. You can't be given transport and then be given transport after. It's the same as my people going to a field, and we pay them field allowance, we go to the hotel, to accommodation, meals, and then the client also gives them the same thing. That is what you call double dipping. Double dipping. And technically, that is double dipping. You did twice for the same thing, which is basically corruption. But these are things we should be able to avoid because they know you did that. No, but you also did that. Now, fine. Show me how you can check. Here is evidence. And then that is how we move. We have to be able to be frank and show that where we went wrong. If we don't do that, then we're not ready to be doing it. I hope I've done justice to your questions, Mr. Kasongo. Strong institutions, we start with people. This is not a theoretical problem at all. If you are developing a structure of any organization, you start with the position, empty position. And you say, okay, here is going to be the general manager. The general manager needs the chief internal auditor. And then you say the chief internal auditor the chief internal auditor can report not to the general manager, but must report to the board of directors. Functional. But in advice, the chief internal auditor must report to the general manager in terms of offering advice. But functionally, he is reporting to the audit committee of the board. So you have the positions which are critical. And then you fill the position. How you fill the position? Criteria. Say, here are the qualifications, and here are the experiences that I want, and then you fill the position. So from where I'm coming from, critical is the structure. And then how you fill the structure with people. And the people look after the structure. That is how the American system is working. Look how they appoint judges. It's a very rigorous process. Huh? Of course, eventually it's the president who appoints somebody, but the process is very rigorous. Almost always the president will, because they may have a majority, but the process is very, very rigorous. You saw the last case. Even issues that happen years ago, they get raised. You harass somebody, and they have an option to come back and say, no, you harassed me, such and such a time. That time we didn't have mobile phones, but even mobile phones, they would have sent a text. This is the text you sent me. And you lose your job. So the rigorousness of the process is extremely important, to fill these positions. And I think more important for me, and I've seen this, in this country, some people have more self-importance than others. And I don't know if it's appropriate, but they make excellent, for example, judges. Some people make excellent judges. The example, Jackfruit, the late Mkaguzi. How did he come about? He studied very well, and he thought he was very, very independent, and his judgments were excellent. These are the kind of people you want to lead institutions, because they won't take nonsense. Somebody says things like that, they will confront you straight away. So look, honorable executive, this is what you say. From my position, it doesn't make sense to me. You are required to provide me resources to work properly. However, which is my mandate, you have no role in interfering in that. It's public. And then you solve your problem, huh? Because after that, he can't do anything. But who is going to do that? We can't. And that is where the problem is. So my suggestion is the structures are more important than people. And then after structures, we appoint people. The people look at the structures. So we start with structures, and then people look at the structures. And they get more people, they develop more people, the structure becomes stronger and stronger, and then eventually we cannot solve the structures. Thank you very much.
Okay, some more questions? John.
I have three questions, if not comments. One is around the acquired stupidity. And you are talking about people who are really seem to be intelligent, but yet they make stupid questions. If you can clarify a little bit more, what actually causes that? Number two is, it's a very general question around if there were no corruption in Tanzania, how would this country look like? Number three is around the source or the society which brings up the leaders in the country. And you seem to suggest that the leaders are more corrupt than the society itself. You go to the extent of saying that about 60% of people in civil service are at the wrong places, don't have the right people there. And my question is around, you feel that leaders are actually not coming from the society, which is also corrupt.
A lady.
Thanks for giving me this opportunity. Professor, from my understanding on your presentation, I have the fifth question here to ask you. So we need to change the system of governing the society or nation so as to have or to commit this corruption. So if the leader or the current leader of that nation or institution, he or she is not ready to accept the changes so as to bring about government and to remove this corruption system, we as the citizens of the country, what should we do in order to avoid these circumstances? And the other question is, I can recall on one of your tweets that you said that you cannot change the same problem, you cannot change the problem by the same people who have created the problem. So in our country, we have leaders, but these leaders are the ones who are in the ruling system since they have to get that chance up to their time of resign or the time of retire. So how are we going to change the system until we have the same people who are not ready to hear our opinion on the changing? And the last question is, why, for example, in the country like Tanzania, do we have the Ministry of Judiciary or the Ministry to supervise or to clear these problems of corruption, but until now, these systems are not being taken or are not being taken into consideration. Who is supposed to be blamed? What should we do to avoid these circumstances?
Prof, thank you to get opportunity to ask this question. My question is not far away. I have two questions, and my question is not far away from the last person who asked the question. But as I heard your presentation, Prof, you say about you are blaming the system on the issue of corruption, and you said corruption is just like it's interconnected issues. It's like a cross-country issues among the system. And then you have come up with two suggestions. One among the suggestions is the suggestion to cure that problem. One among the suggestions is the reboot, and the other suggestion was about the format. So, in my thought, I thought that the last suggestion that you said to reform the system is all about the radical change of the system, the total transformation as Karl Marx focused on the radical change. So my question is, how can this change could be executed while the mode of production that is prevailing in the system, the capitalist mode of production? And I'm quite sure that you are aware of how. So I would like to hear the further comment or explanation on how that system could be formatted, could be undergo the format. In which way will this happen? And the second question is about one. I would like to quote the one among the professors who suggests that the stickler coach can no longer be profitable to the government. If the government will undergo with that project, will not be profitable, it will take a couple of years to be profitable for the government. And the same scholar, who is, I can say, qualified scholar, and also expert in the same field, were there, the time being that the project of stickler coach was going on. And the same scholar, recurrently, he came out and then advocated the same changes. He said that he advised the government that the government has to drop the project. My question came in your presentation as far as the issue of stupidity, but also courage, openness of the scholar. What is your take as far as this issue concerned, especially the field of the scholar in our country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm advised that I should always stay here because the people online cannot hear me when I go about. I really like going about, but I'll stay here now because we have these limitations. I'll start with the last question. People who had taken a position at some point and now they are taking the opposite position. Mzee Nyerere had an answer for this. And the answer is these people, you should sack them. Because if they had been faithful from the start, they would have disagreed and resigned. They would have disagreed, and you cannot offer a two-pronged opposite position from the same person. That qualifies that person to be terminated from employment. And Mzee Nyerere used to do that. You cannot give an advice and then go back and agree on something else. If you do that, he'll tell you to resign immediately, or he's going to sack you. That's the way to go. You cannot afford people taking opposite position after an event. That cannot be allowed. That is proper management. Stigler's Gorge profitability, I think the jury is out. I don't know whether it is profitable or not, because I have not seen updated proper feasibility study of that. But I was advised once that it will take much, much longer for the dam to fill. So if it takes longer, then the discount period is going to be even longer. And when you do projects that exceed, say, 10 years, when you discount at the rates of maybe for dollar rate, 6-7%, the cash flows of the future become insignificant. And that is where the problem could be. Kama ku value minazi. Mafia coconuts, I remember doing evaluation of mafia coconuts way back in 1992. And 18 years was the time frame. Whatever rate you use, it is not worth it. So the logic then is to use the logic of our forefathers. You plant the seedlings anyway, and then the grandkids will come and harvest. Whether it makes sense today or not is really, really important. I have land, I can put some tree seedlings, I put tree seedlings, and they'll benefit them in the future. Because in terms of cash flows, it doesn't make sense. And that could be the case with Stigler's Gorge. You remind me of the car parks at the University of Dar es Salaam. We borrowed money many years ago to put together the car parks, and they were supposed to be for pay. I did the feasibility study of that, and it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it to borrow to build the car parks at the University of Dar es Salaam. And we had a huge argument. I remember this lady, she was a marketing person. She came to the meeting and said, no, this is no more for businesses to borrow, even if when they have cash. You may have cash, you still borrow. And I said, that is nonsense. Why would you borrow if you have cash? If you have cash, you don't borrow, you use your cash to do whatever you want to do. That argument, I don't know. But she was a senior person. I was a junior academic at that time. And her language carried out. Eventually, the project was carried out. Until today, we never received a single cent from people who are parking. And it's a good project, but in terms of financial numbers, it wasn't worth it. But looking back now, even if it's not worth it, I think generally it's a good project. If we can do the same with the Stigler's Gorge, maybe in 50 years' time, our kids will come and say, okay, these people are quite intelligent to build this dam. Maybe it might be worth it. But as of now, because of resource limitations, my suggestion is always not to approach any project unless you have done proper feasibility studies. And if they're old, they need to be updated. You recollect the teams and you do the numbers game, you justify a decision as of today. And then if it is not worth it, but you still want to do it, then you justify and say, look, I think it's not worth it. We have margins here that can be allowed, but we're willing to take a risk in 50 years' time. This could be a good project, so we're going to undertake the project, and we can see the logic. So that is the way you want to go if you want to go on with these kind of things. This is your second question. Your first question is corruption, interconnected. How do you execute this in a capitalist mode of production? I don't think it depends on any mode of production. If you look at the example of Singapore, the first thing that gentleman said, Kuan Lu, yeah, he said pragmatic, which means do what is best for you. Socialist, capitalist, it doesn't matter. If it's good for you, you take it. So I think corruption is not good in a capitalist mode. Corruption is not good in a socialist mode. So either way, corruption is not something we should be doing. So whatever mode of production we are in, we should always fight corruption. My suggestion was reformat, not either reboot or reformat. I suggested reformat because we have so much dead wood, and some people have gone so far off, it's not worth it to recover. If somebody can go to the extent of calling somebody Mungu, that person you can't recover from. So I think we need to reform. I think we need to reform it. So I think I've answered your question. The other question, I haven't written the names because I haven't heard your names. But will it change the system of government? What is the role of citizens? I mean, the role of citizens, as always, is to be interested participants. To ask questions and seek to get answers. If we don't ask questions and seek to get answers, we leave it to the leaders to decide. If we ask questions, they are going to involve us. So if we have interest, we say, here is our interest, ask the question and seek a response for that question. So our role as citizens is to participate in everything that is of interest to us. Of course, finally, this translates into elections. We have to go into meaningful elections, and we elect the people who are very good for us. Not because they've given us something or they promise they're going to do this for us and then we elect them. That is not proper election. And this is a huge area. I hope one of these days somebody else is going to come here and speak about elections in this country. I think elections in this country is more of voting rather than elections. We participate in the voting process, but we don't necessarily elect. We saw last time. All of us went and voted. Did you elect? I don't think we elected. And this is where the problem is. And I promised myself I'm not going to go into any voting process again until it is a completely digital process. I vote here, it's going to be counted centrally. If we reach that stage, I'm going to go into a voting process. Without that, I'm not going to into any voting process because there's so much fraud, it is not worth voting for myself. I can't change the problem while some people who create, okay, I think this is where you are referring to a situation where it is not concerning me. The reference to where I say you cannot change a problem with the same people who created the problem is to a Twitter account that is not my account. So to use the word of President Trump, fake news. I think there are 3 or 4 Twitter accounts that are not my accounts. I have a Twitter account, but it has been inactive since the closure of the internet. I haven't been able to go in there, and I use always my desktop because I need a bigger screen to get into these things. And since the closure of the internet, I can't use my desktop to go into Twitter. I can't use my phone. I can use my phone, but I don't like using a small screen, so I'm not active on Twitter anymore. Whoever is active now, it's me, somebody else, so I can't answer that question. Judiciary and Justice Ministry, the superior should be Justice Ministry, because the ministry takes responsibility for 2 things, and this is general. A minister should take responsibility for strategy and policy. Not operations. What you see now is ministries getting involved in the operations. That, from where I'm coming, is not proper. A minister cannot solve an operational problem. They can only take responsibility for strategy and policy. What we have now is not proper government, where a ministry goes to the district and try to solve a problem. That is not the work of a ministry. Ministry should be in the ministry and solve strategic and policy issues best. And then they receive quarterly reports, and then they act on that, and that is the way you run a government. We are not running government properly right now, but strictly speaking, it is the ministry that takes responsibility to connect any wrong in the legislative system, and that is where the buck stops. And then the third question, which was the first question, was why do we have acquired stupidity? I think there are 2 reasons. The first reason, I mentioned this, is fear. People fear authority, Because in the past, in the recent past, we have what I call degradation ceremonies. Degradation ceremonies, where if you are removed from a position, it is not a very pleasant sight. Things will be said that are not good for you, you are not this, you are not this, you are not this. And in proper management, you don't do that. If you're parting company with an employee, you write him a letter of reference to say, unless you have evidence that they were thieves, even when they're thieves, I mean, you write just an impartial letter. I worked with this gentleman for 10 years. You don't say, no, he was not good for me. But if they call you in confidence, you might tell them, I had a problem with this gentleman. For a number of years, some money was stolen from me, and this and this. But usually the letter of reference is a good letter. And that's how you part company. But as in the recent past, people will be called and said, you're useless, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. And the degradation ceremony is not a very good ceremony, so people fear that. And therefore they become stupid to protect themselves from these degradation ceremonies. But more importantly, I think a lot of people lack confidence as well. If you know what you're doing, you can stand your ground. If you know what you're doing, you can stand your ground. If you don't know what you're doing and you lack confidence, you won't stand your ground. I remember once somebody called me and said, no, you need to go to press and do 1, 2, 3. And I said, no, I'm not going to press. I'm not going to do 1, 2, 3. But I'm your executive. Why don't you do that? I said, yes, you are my executive, but I'm listening to my immediate subordinates, and these are my professionals. They advised me not to go to the press within the next 2 weeks, and that's the decision I'm going to stick to. And then the phone went off. He didn't like it, but it was my position. My people advised me, and I liked myself not to go to the press, and I wasn't going to go to the press. So despite the pressure, I said no. Because I'm confident, I said this is what I'm going to be doing, and that's my position. You don't like it, fine, good. But this is my position. And a lot of people cannot take such a position, which is regretful, really. Because these people are good. Some people are very good lawyers. They can stand their ground. They don't stand their ground. Some good people are very good engineers. They should stand their ground. They don't stand their ground. And this is very, very unfortunate. I think I forgot to give you that example here of Jangwani Bridge. Huh? Did I give you the example of Jangwani Bridge? It was on the slide, if you read the slides. I'm going to give you Jangwani Bridge because I'm going to refer to the Kiegea Bridge. Huh? The Jangwani Bridge was a disaster from day one, from design stage. And I know a guy who was a technician there. And he came home and told me the design of the Jangwani Bridge is utterly useless. It's not going to be useful for you. Why? It is too low. There's going to be a lot of debris there, and it's going to fill. It's not going to work for you. I said, did you tell the people? They know. I told they know. It's a designer. We gave our comments, but we are contractors, so we'll have to contract the ASPA specifications. And then the bridge was constructed. It's now working, and we have a problem. Every drip of rain, Jangwani cannot be crossed. Who takes responsibility for that? It has to be somebody who made that decision. And somebody who made that decision got scot-free. And then you have the Kiegea Bridge in Dodoma, right? Kiegea, Dodoma. As you go to Dodoma, there's a Kiegea Bridge. Dodoma. It's the Morogoro region, but as you go towards Dodoma. What happened there was the bridge was damaged by rain, and then the regional engineer was not terminated. I think he was removed from there, and then an acting engineer came in place. And then for some reason, the executive went and visited the bridge. And this gentleman comes, I know the gentleman, Engineer Saleh comes. He's a chubby chap, big chap. Say, why are you this big? I can't answer that question. Because I eat well, but he didn't answer. Why are you this big? And he was flabbergasted. What is this? Who are you? I'm the acting maintenance engineer. And he's been asked questions before the bridge collapsed. I have no way. I was somewhere else. I was brought here as an acting maintenance engineer. That should have been the response. But he wasn't given even that. Eventually, the decision was, get these people terminated, including him, very specifically, including him as well. Ideally, you want somebody to say, this decision is not proper. This guy takes no responsibility for this because this happened after the bridge had collapsed. But nobody did anything. And then, of course, he stayed away for 3-4 months. He got his salary, he stayed away for 4 months. But he was terminated, which is unfair in my view. But what was needed there was somebody with confidence to say, this decision was wrong. Even after the meeting there, you say, look, or you can even write and say, I was there, this is what happened, and we have legal minds. This is what happened. My view is your decision here was incorrect because of this and this. This should have been the proper decision, and my advice is you do 1, 2, 3, send it on and somebody will read it. But nobody did anything because of the 3 reasons: fear and lack of confidence. I think I've answered these 3 questions. Huh? Is the society too corrupt? I don't think so. I think we have a lot of good people. We have a lot of good people. Not all of us are corrupt. We have a lot of good people, and I think good enough to be able to run this country very well. Some are in this country, some are not in this country, but we should be able to use all the resources we have. All hands on deck. All hands on deck, and we can move this country forward. I think we can go to the last one now. Maybe we choke up. I can't answer that question. Kama hakuna corruption, Tanzania ingekuwaje? I think if we didn't have corruption, and even the right leadership from 1961, Tanzania would have been the leader in agriculture. I think we have got the best lands in the whole of Africa. If you flew from Zanzibar to Mwanza on a light aircraft, you'll see how good we are as a country in terms of the river systems, in terms of the land that is basically undeveloped. Only around Lake Eyasi you see a little bit of farming, but this country could be developed very, very largely and feed the entire continent, and maybe export as well. So I think we could have been very, very far. The problem is we did not have strategic leadership, which we badly need now. Thank you very much.
Can we have the last set of questions? Please introduce yourself first and then ask questions. All right, my name is Halfan Abdallah. Thank you so much, Professor, for sharing with us on this topic. My question is related to corruption and political system. I heard you mention about the legislative system, but I think from the works of other scholars, the like of Professor Michael Lofsky, who wrote Political Economy of Tanzania, Decline and Recovery, he said that there are only 2 ways to be wealthy in a country like Tanzania now. You are either doing business and politically connected, or you are a public official having a side business, okay, of which he connects with some form of corruption. So I want to hear your take on the political organizations that we have and their contributions to the corruption crisis that we have. That's one. Second, being a former CAG and also being someone who is always interested to read CAG reports, I see always no names are mentioning for the corrupt people in the reports. The recent one I can give is of fire department. We are told almost 200 million have been taken by the officer particularly in finance, but you see the official in finance. Why no name calling on these reports so that the public knows who took away the money, so that they can maybe also try to see if they can do something. So those are my two questions. Maybe the last one is, do you see as part of the solution to have a CAG office that can also prosecute? So those are my questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Just also to share a few remarks. One is a question, one is a suggestion. My name is Michael. I'm a financial analyst. I'm working with the government. I had a question asked by the last speaker about audits not mentioned names, but it's not all audits. I've also got some of the audit reports where the names are mentioned, the position and where they are. But the problem is why this audit recommendation are not worked by the government. That is the question. And I just want to say maybe there are two sides of approach. There are those who are implemented for some reason, and there are others which are not implemented for some other reason. I think Prof will respond on that. What is actually happening? And I have a case. I call one of your audit reports in one of the organizations where 1,000,000.7 USD and the 802 shillings were based by one of the institutions. The names was mentioned, the position, everything, but that report, I don't know if that has been happening since 2019, when I read that report. So my question is, what's actually happening to the government, specifically where policy recommendation are issued, but the no implementation is being done? And what do you think is done on that area? And the second is, I see there are some officials, government officials in some area where do obstacle the registration and some of the acts which they are actually responsible to work on it. I have one case where the minister is responsible to appoint, and the act states exactly which person needs to be appointed and when it is needed. But if it goes against, take someone from the street, what actually needs to be done for that person? Nobody's happening in this, and that's the act actually happening in some of the audit spots already. Thank you very much. Let me end up here.
We're going to take the last question here.
My name is Kailan. Few questions here. I need to hear your comment. So the first question is availability of most politicians in the institutions. It read the rules or decrees of professional ethics, which can result in lack of integrity in the office. Another one, you are talking about reform, to reformat the government. That's a good idea, a good suggestion. So, what's the effect if we are going to reformat the government without getting a new constitution? You can write the reformat and the new constitution. And then the last one can be a suggestion. And I don't think that corruption is wrong. I don't think that corruption is wrong. If we don't have ethical standing. So it's a pain to our government and our society to teach divine ethical theory from a childhood questions.
Yes,
Professor.
thank you very much. Thank you. No, we can't. We can't. We gave 3 opportunities, and that's it. I think we need to be quite strict. We can't. We can talk after here. We can have a conversation. I'll make myself available to you, no problem. But in terms of what we agreed, 3 sets of questions, 3 times, done. I'm going to start with my friend Khalfan Abdallah. Corruption in political systems. 2 ways to be successful. Business, politically connected. This works here, but works everywhere else. It works in New York, it works everywhere else. Business people always will look for political connectivity because it makes life a little bit easier. What is happening is they don't allow politicians to get into their business. So there is separation there. When you need them, you can all have a cup of coffee, build relationships, solve a few problems, but you can never take part in my decisions. What we have here is actually politicians getting involved in business. They call this political entrepreneurship. Political enterprise. The reason you get into politics is because you want to make money in politics. And a lot of these politicians are like this. I know a person who became a special, they call them special MPs, huh? Special seats MPs. And all of a sudden, she owns a certain, not disused, but it's kind of a scrap parastatals that has a unit that still is functioning. That unit is able to treat timber. So she has interest in that, and she only operates that unit that treats timber. And she makes a lot of money. So the reason she went into politics is because she could use her political connections to get access to business opportunities. And a lot of our politicians are like that. And this is something we should be able to prevent. And one cure is the lifestyle audit. You came in without anything, 5 years, you own a property, you own this, you drive a S-Class Mercedes. Explain to us where you made this money. You cannot explain, the property goes away. And then you say no name calling on the CAG's reporting. I'm not sure about this. I recall in the past, you will see names and their positions. It depends on the level. If you went to the specific, the abstract report will not have name, the abstract report. But you went to the specific report of an organization, the name will be there. So the parliament has access to these names and they can act if they chose to do so. CAG to prosecute, I don't think it's wise to do this because of the principle of separation. Huh? Investigate, and then somebody else should be able to prosecute. You can provide the evidence, but somebody should be able to prosecute. The only thing I would suggest and support is penalties. You know, you go into the field, you want a certain voucher, you're told, oh, the voucher is not there. And then it's not material enough, so you say, okay, you report these vouchers were not available to me in the course of the audit. What I'm suggesting is from that point onwards, there should be a penalty on the director. You're going to lose 10% of your salary until the voucher is found. So he's going to be working very hard to make sure that the voucher is found. We get 10% of the salary, months 1, months 2, months 3, and it's not going to be recovered. This money is going to go away into a central pool. So this is docking penalties for non-provision of documents. That is not prosecution. It's availing documents. You fail to avail documents, the CAG's office should be able to penalize you for that, and then you provide the information, the penalty stops. That is, elsewhere that is what is happening, but in this country you cannot do that. I think we should be able to do that as well. I think I've more or less answered the number of questions from you. Michael, mentioning names, we covered that. Why recommendation not worked on by the government? I think there is just one reason. The reason is there is no follow-up arrangement. One, we don't have a database of all recommendations. If we had a database of all recommendations, we'll have recommendations from 2013 up to 2021. And then we'll say this recommendation was implemented, this was not implemented, this is under implementation. And then that database gets shared between the CAG's office and the parliament. And the parliament is going to see that they dropped the ball here and here and here. When I was in office, we had created that database, and I think it's still available now. The only question is to push it to the parliament. Remember, the problem we had at one time was when there was an election, they would say this is a new parliament. So whatever happened in the past, it happened in the past, this is a new parliament. And I remember being told that once, I don't know, recommendation last year, they are gone because this is now a new parliament, parliament number 11. Parliament number 10 is parliament number 10. We're going on now with new life, which is not proper. Recommendations should be recommendations until they are implemented. So if you have a database and the database is formal, then it gets handed over. The new parliament, these are the recommendations outstanding from 5 years ago. You still have a responsibility to make sure that these recommendations are implemented. That system does not exist as of now, but it needs to exist, and that will be a cure, and we will avoid a lot of the problems we had in the past, because then you say 2013, here are 11 recommendations, none was implemented, and then that proves you did not implement recommendations. But right now it's going to be my word against your word because we don't have a database. We should have a common database with the audit office and the parliament, and then we can go through all the recommendations and then point responsibility. Why did you not follow up this recommendation? Why do you not follow up this recommendation? And that currently is not being done. You know, when you hear somebody say what you receive in the parliament are just queries, you know we have serious problems. And nobody raised that issue. Somebody say, well, what we receive in parliament are queries. Queries are first level findings in the field. And then they get cleared, and then they remain outstanding. And then if they are material, they form part of the report as part of your findings. These are substantive issues that go into the report. They're just not mere queries. But somebody said these are just queries. And nobody pushed back to say, oh, you are selling us fried ice cream. What, people get sold fried ice cream all the time. Can you buy fried ice cream? You can. In this country, you can buy fried ice cream. And it's not proper. It's not proper. Because then, as citizens, we get taken for a ride. We should not allow that. So the answer is database. By the audit office, shared by the parliament, over a long period of time. Even when there is transition in parliament, the database of recommendation has its life and will keep moving on. And then we can push responsibility to the parliament that actually you did not implement recommendation of 2010. You did not implement recommendation of 2015. You did not implement recommendation of such and such a time. Because then there's going to be evidence of a database of recommendations, and that will be a cure. And then you had a question, obstacles to appoint, not to follow the law. I've seen this several times, where the minister is supposed to appoint. Look at this, for example, the best practice requires that every board must have a professional accountant sitting in the audit committee. Every board must have a professional accountant sitting in the audit committee. But minister will appoint people and no professional accountants are appointed, which is basically not best practice. But who should act? The regulatory authority of accountants and auditors should do that, should be interested in board appointments all the time and write to the minister, say, Minister X, you appointed these people, there is not a single accountant here, it is your job to do that. We have a list of all professional accountants, ask us, we can give you the name, appoint somebody here. But nobody does that. So everybody is dropping the ball, and therefore the minister is going to be left to do whatever they like. But even when the law says appoint somebody from such an organization, even that is not allowed. It is up to the auditors to point that out. When I was in, I will always make sure that the appointment of boards is highlighted and we point all these matters out. They need to be pointed going forward. I think Michael have done justice to your question. Kaila Mikidadi, this is the last one now. Availabilities of most politicians in offices, I'm not sure. But I think we fought this war and we accomplished it and make sure that politicians are not appointed. I don't think there are politicians anymore in boards of our parastatals because that was a fight. And I think it was resolved that no political appointees, no MPs will be appointed in board of directors. I think that is still the case now. So I don't think this is happening anymore, but it happens. We have to point it out that such and such a person should not be fitting in a board of directors. You remind me my life as a director of one of the companies, and we had one MP in the board, and that MP was virtually useless because he will come to meetings very early and he will say nothing from the start of the meeting to the end of the meeting. Once the meeting is closed, he'll go to the secretary of the board, wanted his bahasha. And we told, look, in this organization, we don't pay like that. Payments to directors are made quarterly here. So wait until the end of the quarter, you see money in your bank account. And he didn't like it. You know, I need to be paid now. Yes, you need to be paid, but the policy is we pay quarterly. But then after some time, the other guys asked me, who is this guy? Why is he not speaking anything? And then I went to the minister and said, Minister, I have a guy in my board who is virtually useless. Please get rid of him, give me somebody else. And he was a guy, the minister, and within a week he got rid of the chap and he went safely to where he went to. And that's the way you want to operate a board. Pick people who are good and identify people who are weak and get rid of the people who are weak. But our boards not necessarily operate like that, but it's the way you want to operate. Corruption is not wrong if we don't have an ethical standing. I thought we have a misunderstanding there. But I got your point eventually. You're saying without a proper ethical anchoring, it's not fair to say corruption is wrong. Because what is wrong is our ethical bearing. I think that's the point, which I agree to. That which is why I'm saying going forward in 20, 30 years' time, what we need to address is our kids. Because we are already gone. We have attitudes and characters that may not be able to be reformed quickly. While we focus in our kids, we may bring up kids that are probably in 20, 15 years, and they will be much better leaders. So in that case, I agree very well. Thank you very much, members.
Thank you very much, Professor Mussa Assad. We are nearing the end of our event, and I would like now to invite our brother Hamza Kasong to offer us a vote of thanks. Professor. Karibu.
As you have heard, my name is Hamza Kasongo. So on behalf of all the attendees and on my own behalf, is it on? Oh. On behalf of all the attendees and on my own behalf, I would like to first of all express our gratitude to the management of Muslim University of Morogoro
for arranging such a wonderful and educational meeting. And it is my hope that they will keep up to their word of making this series work. And if this is what, then we expect to have many more enlightening lectures such as this. And secondly, as you will agree with me, I think there is not sufficient words to express our gratitude to Professor Mussa Assad for the enlightening lecture which he has given us. It has opened our minds of a lot of us. There are things which we did not know, and if we did, it was just very, very on a sketchy point. And then secondly, I would like to thank Professor Assad for his courage, because in this country now especially, we have become accustomed not to speak out loud your mind. You know something, you'd rather just speak to either your wife in the bedroom, or if you want to make an audience, then you speak to your children at the dining table. Thereafter, you don't speak anything. So, Professor, for that, I thank you very much indeed. Lastly, I would like to commend you, sir, for your principles, which you have displayed here aptly. You said at the beginning that you will be taking 3 questions at every session, and when you were asked to take the 4th question when you were about to close, you said no, we had agreed 3, and you stuck to 3. Very few people do that, sir. Thank you very much indeed, and God bless you.
Brothers and sisters, we have now reached the end of our session. We thank you very, very much for taking time out and being with us here, listen to our good professor. We thank you very much. You will have to expect some more sessions similar to this in the near future, inshallah. And God bless you and go well. Thank you very much.
Tasti Aroma, mchele mzuri, msafi na unanukia. Unapatikana maduka yote Tanzania. Piga namba 0755017073. Popote ulipo, nyumbani au dukani. Tasti Aroma, mchele bora wa kunukia kutoka Mbeya.
Habari zilizotufikia hivi punde.
GNM Cargo, kampuni ya usafirishaji wa mizigo kutoka China kuja Afrika Mashariki, inatimiza miaka 10 ya uaminifu kuhudumia wana Afrika Mashariki. Mwandishi wetu Minho ana taarifa zaidi.
Kama unavyoona, tuma pesa zako kwa wakala wako China. Kazi nyingine tuachie sisi GNM Cargo, tukupakilie mzigo, tukusafirishie kwa niaba yako, tukague kwa niaba yako kwa bei nafuu.
Kwa mawasiliano zaidi tupigie kupitia 0677 066 551. GNM Cargo, we voyage your dreams.